So I think the big call out, as you said there, Pav, was the tariffs. So it might sound a bit boring, but it's probably the reason for why we, had so much bloodshed yesterday, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Not just in crypto, but other risk markets like, tech stocks and other things.
I think just the unpredictability of, what Trump's done since he's come into office, he's just been very much shoot from the hip, but very obviously tactically. A lot of the tariffs are coming in a very aggressive frequency. Like he just point at one country, then move on to the next, move on to the next. So there was growing concern that, who else is potentially going to get sanctioned with these tariffs? There's talks of the EU, Japan, China, the likes. It's all happening. No one was safe, right? So Mexico and China were the initial propagators of a lot of the fear in the market heading into the weekend trading. And crypto being 24/7 kind of started to price in that fear while the rest of the markets were asleep is probably the best way I could articulate what we saw happen come Monday as soon as the markets open. No other way to say it, crash. Everything gapped down on the open.
The shock came from Canada, right? And Mexico, because in the lead up to, the presidential election, he was campaigning a lot for like tariffs on China. I think we also saw that in his last presidential term. But something that at least I didn't hear it from him was tariffs on, Canada and Mexico. It's two neighbors, right? So it imposed a 25% tariff on both Canada and Mexico and 10% tariff on China. And Canada basically retaliated very quickly, imposing the same 25% tariff because obviously, a lot of imports that Canada gets are from the US. So I guess it does impact the US as well. But I guess this is Trump just throwing his weight around, trying to, act on a lot of the things that he said he would.
Yeah, he wants to get that border control up. He wanted them to come to the party for trafficking, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, we saw the market, we saw the biggest liquidation event in its history, $2 billion worth of market positions wiped off. There's even speculation that number is underreported because the API limits of exchanges reporting this data, they can only hit so frequently. So the damage could be north of $2 billion. We just don't know. Maybe something will come out in the next few days that might be even $5 to $10 billion. Who knows? But yeah, I guess what was interesting to see, like I came into the office this morning, obviously we're talking about how bad it looked yesterday and, look, we could see a recovery, maybe start to build. Instantly, we saw some news about these tariffs being on pause because both Mexico and Canada came to the party, came to some agreements overnight while we were sleeping. And lo and behold, we're seeing massive rebounds and recoveries across a lot of assets. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so, we had a bit of a flash crash, if you're lucky enough to have gotten in, like Pav and I did. Pav, I reckon you were probably more tactical about it. I just saw, this was a good time to dollar cost average in and buy a bit of a discount, and I just timed it perfectly. I'm not much of a chart guy, so a bit of luck involved there. But I sort of just bought in, some of my bigger holdings like Bitcoin, Solana, and Sui. Are tariffs good for crypto or are they bad? So I think the main takeaway is in the short term, they can lead to a lot of inflation, right? Particularly in the US, because you're now spending more money on, locally produced goods rather than goods coming from China, which are obviously cost a lot less to produce. And also inflation is one. Also, they can lead to a stronger US dollar, and that is Trump's end game, right? He wants, the US economy to be in its strongest ever position by the time he's finished. And so these sort of tariffs can boost sort of the local economy, which leads to a stronger US dollar, which in fact typically does lead to a weakening crypto market, right? Because we see like a correlation between a strong US economy and weaker crypto, right? Or not so much economy, but more like the US dollar.
The dollar, in specific. Because it is globally traded in US dollar stable coins. So if that US dollar coin is relatively more stronger, it's going to take, it's harder for that crypto asset to be going higher. 100%. But I think a lot of it also was around just the uncertainty and a lot of it happening on a weekend. I think it just caused a lot of fear. And we see what happened when the market is unsure and fearful. This was a trade war, you could call it. We've seen the same thing with, I guess, in most recent time. What sort of calls to me when I saw a drop like this was the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Sure.
I think the candle almost looks identical. Not identical, but the way it sort of slid off a cliff, it's very much, it just reminded me of that exact same phase. Different part of the market cycle completely. By that stage, we were already in a bear market, whereas now it's a little bit different. obviously, hopefully, still thinking we're in a bull market. So
yeah, and I think it did strike a lot of fear into the crypto market in particular, because even from SwiftX's point of view, we saw a lot of sells. From my point of view, I don't see those flash crashes, particularly on the back of geopolitical events as a place to sell or to get super fearful. So I was holding on, and like I said, I dollar cost averaged into some of my larger holdings. But what was your sort of approach to the news?
Mine was just Bitcoin. I just knew. My thesis has always been that the next big move is Bitcoin moving. So Bitcoin dominance, like that's something we've talked about on the podcast for some while. We're sort of seeing that go home, put in its top, if you will. Then we really start to see that altcoin, alt season market propagate. So the Bitcoin dominance is just a metric that shows how much of the total market cap does Bitcoin occupy. So we've seen so much adoption stories of, banks now in the US being able to custody crypto and handle crypto. We've got the strategic reserves coming online. There's even talks of how they're going to fund that strategic reserve stockpile, which I know we're going to talk about very shortly. So for me, it just seems like all tailwinds are blowing behind Bitcoin right now. And for altcoins, like I still think they'll have their time in the sun, but I still feel like Bitcoin hasn't really had that, oh my God moment. It's in the media everywhere again. Like it's kind of like now, it's so sought after. So I that was why I specifically just looked at dollar cost averaging. Also, that was honestly my approach too. Just Bitcoin, I saw certain key levels get wiped out, and I was happy just to, as we saw, just systematic buying. I just followed that buying as well because it was pretty uncharacteristic. But like one way I track the market is following something called the Coinbase Premium. So measuring the spot prices that Coinbase is spending, compare that to, let's say, what Binance is spending. If Coinbase is paying a premium, it generally means that, let's say, the Coinbase, whose user base is mainly US participants, they're paying a higher price. So there's not enough stock to go around. They're paying above market rates. So that tells me there's demand. So I just basically followed that same demand into the early, let's say 9, 10 p.m. last night, and I sort of stopped buying at that stage.
But why does that indicate there's demand? Because it's like more of an indication of like the US retail market?
Coinbase could be institutional, it could be retail, you don't know. But let's say, for example, like a lot of the ETFs, they've got Coinbase as a custodian. There's speculation that, if you see a premium developing, it could be, direct action of those entities. And even if it's not, a lot of the wealth in the world is held obviously in US based entities. So, if they're all trading through a US exchange, I think it's just a good way to sort of proxy what each individual geography is doing on exchanges. So like Bitstamp might be another one you'd look for. What's European action on the market for like a European sort of premium. So that was just, again, like we're talking about sort of strategies. That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
So I guess that leads into sort of what we want to touch on next is where do we go from here? Like, because we've had this big sort of sell-off, do we just sort of trade sideways for a little while? Are you looking just as what you said before, like just focusing on Bitcoin for the next couple of weeks? Like what's your approach there?